Hi, this is Hunt Lyman. I'm here with Paul Hapner and Bob Dornan, and we are going to follow up on a recent Education and School Life Committee forum that we did on place-based education at Hill School. And we're actually at the top of the hill on a beautiful end of October day, which we thought would be an appropriate space. And we'd just like to talk to you about some of the things that we discussed in this forum. We hope that it will be interesting to you and will give you some idea of the kinds of things that we did when we were here. So we're actually going to start, we're all going to get out of the camera space in just a minute and let you look at the land because this is such a great view from the top of Hill School. But we're going to start the same way that we started the forum, which is just for about 10 seconds or so to ask you to reflect on a special place in your childhood. Like think about when you were young. Was there a tree house, a rock, a special place in nature that you really felt connected to? And so we're going to step out and just think about that for about 10 seconds. Now in the forum, we asked people to share with each other the things that they found. And something that I find has been tremendously powerful for adults to think back on special places when they were younger. And I hope that you found a place. And we hope that Hill School is becoming one of those places for our kids. I know that my son, who is now a sophomore at Highland, his homecoming, he and a bunch of other Hill alums brought their guests from Highland up here to the top of the hill because he really felt like this was an important place. And they were so proud to show their friends the school. That's the kind of thing that we really want to do. I'm going to read a couple of quotations from a book called Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv, just to give you a flavor as to the kinds of philosophical impulses that are really motivating us when we have the place-based education program. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what it is and what it brings to your child. So the first is, we have such a brief opportunity to pass on to our children our love for this earth and to tell our stories. These are the moments when the world is made whole. In my children's memories, the adventures we've had together in nature will always exist. And the second, which I particularly love, is an environment-based education movement at all levels of education will help students realize that school isn't supposed to be a polite form of incarceration, but a portal to the wider world. So with those ideas from Richard Louv and background, I'm going to invite Paul Hapner to come in and to talk a little bit about what does the place-based education program at Hill School bring to your child? What is the value that it adds to the education? Paul?
The first thing that we want to speak to is what the place-based education program here is. And in its simplest form, it's our school-wide commitment to use our campus as an educational resource. We have been gifted with a resource of a 140-acre campus, and we want to incorporate that and allow our students to have access and to engage in that campus as part of their education. I'm going to read a little bit from our philosophy that places this in a more solid context. Place-based education is defined as a program that uses the community, campus, and local spaces to grow a child's sense of wonder and exploration, as well as to foster a personal connection with the natural and man-made environment. We believe a solid connection with nature produces healthy children who go on to become responsible stewards. Place-based education is different from classroom-based or textbook-based learning in that it enhances a student's understanding of local history, culture, and ecology. There are a couple of things from that definition which I would like to highlight and I think is really important for our children and our students. That first is that sense of wonder, that sense of engagement. And when we think about people as lifelong learners, one of the core components of that in developing that sense of lifelong learning is that sense of wonder. The second is the motivation to care, which comes from that connection, and that connection with our community, but also the connection with the land and with our campus. So the question then comes up, what is the value of place-based education for your child? And there's really three things that I want to highlight. The first is probably the easiest to talk about, and that's about the importance of place-based education for hands-on opportunities for your child. It's hands-on learning, and we know a lot in education about the value of hands-on learning. It bridges the gap between concepts and reality, between theory and practice. Kids get a chance to take what they're learning in school, the data, and the process, and give it some sort of a real-world significance for themselves. The other thing is that it encourages a growth mindset. Being outdoors, it gives opportunities for kids to engage in a process and projects with a chance to try and maybe fall short of their outcome, and in that way learn from that and try again. That idea of developing grit from learning from mistakes. It also fosters engagement and accelerates learning. We know that if children are engaged and interested, that is a quality which really accelerates the learning process. And also it engages a child's emotions. And one of the things with place-based education is that if we can engage a child's emotions, their interest, if we can engage their frustration, if we can engage all of that emotional experience in the learning process, that's a way for us to help children grow as learners, as well as help them grow as people. And ultimately, I'll talk a little bit about this later, about their stewardship. And finally, it personalizes learning. One of the great advantages of being outdoors in an environment where kids are engaging the world is that it gives them an opportunity to engage it in an individual way, rather than needing everyone to engage it in the same or a similar way. The second thing I want to speak to today about the value of place-based education for your children is about the developmental benefits. As an elementary school, we get to work with your children from very young age all the way to the cusp of their adolescence and young adulthood. And there are a number of things that we know from research which are powerful benefits of being connected to the natural world and being outdoors. There's a few of them. There are things that I think are easy to recognize as a value for all of us. One of the things that we know is that kids who spend more time outdoors have increased their focus and concentration and self-discipline. This is both for the average child, but also a child that struggles with issues with attention or concentration. I think it makes sense to know that it also increases motor fitness, coordination, balance, agility, all of those things, and it improves our child's health. Studies show that kids who spend more time outdoors are actually sick less frequently. Some of the things we may not think about is that time outdoors, especially playtime outdoors, increases our children's creativity and imagination in their play. And that becomes a very important underpinning for our kids in terms of engaging their interest in their studies within the classroom, as well in the things that we learn through history and English and math and science. Another thing that we don't often think about as a benefit for our kids is that it also fosters the development of language and collaborative skills. When we have kids out in the field and outdoors working on projects together, it gives them an opportunity to work together, to sort things out, to talk things through. And finally, in terms of a developmental benefit, we also have research that shows that it increases children's awareness and helps support the development of their reasoning abilities and observational skills, which are all important things for our children as students and as learners in the world. The final thing I would like to speak to is the value of place-based education in terms of teaching attitudes and developing values around sustainability and stewardship. I talked earlier about having the outdoors be connected with that sense of wonder, and that sense of wonder is a powerful motivator in a lifelong learner. I also I also talked about that sense of connection to the world. When someone cares about something, then someone is motivated to work towards stewardship, taking care of it, preserving it for themselves, their community, and those in the future. The other thing is that being outdoors instills a sense of peace and being one with the world. I'm a psychologist, and as a clinical psychologist, one of the things that I'm aware of is that from infancy on, we are filled with two very powerful instincts. One of them is for our safety. If we think about the little child that's exploring a room and they get halfway across the room and they stop and they turn and they look back to mom or dad to make sure that it's okay and that they move on. The other is that we have a drive for curiosity, engagement, and exploration. The challenge in educating our children is finding that dynamic balance between independence and autonomy and a sense of safety and security. One of the unique benefits of place-based education and having time in nature and in the outdoors is that it provides both of those things. It supports the sense of peace, of being one in the world, that sense of quiet safety, and also at the same time inspires that sense of wonder and that desire for exploration. And out of that, I think that stewardship grows, that their love and care for the place they live is a driving motivator in their stewardship. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Lyman now, who will talk a little bit about the history of our place-based education program.
Thanks, Paul. And I'm bringing Bob Dornan in too, because I think one of the things that's unique about Hill School is that often the people who are the most important teachers at the school may not always hold that role, and I really think that's true of Bob. I think Bob's a fantastic teacher for our students, and he has as deep roots as anyone in this program. His father, also Bob Dornan, a legendary science teacher who really began, in some sense, began the place-based education program, though he didn't know it by that name, because his commitment to taking kids outside, to letting the earth teach them, starting a recycling program back in the 70s. And you talked about your dad's sense of curiosity, right? That
That's
was really
right.
powerful.
Absolutely.
With you when you were a kid. And that, I think, is really something that has always existed in the school since the 70s. But of course, in the 70s and in the 80s, we were on, 3.5 acres, something like that?
About 4 acres, yeah.
Very small footprint. And we didn't have anything like the campus that we were unexpectedly received in the early 90s, when all of a sudden we ended up with a series of gifts from the Clark family that really made it almost a 140-acre campus. And that was something that was a tremendous opportunity. And for us originally, it was building the core campus. But Polly Rowley, who is really a hero at Hill School, how many dump trucks do you think of topsoil she brought in over hundreds, probably over summer, and planted a school arboretum that is just magnificent throughout this whole campus. Very, very deliberate planting that now 25 years later has just become this magnificent educational resource for kids. So Polly Rowley was followed by Ben Wren, who designed many of the Dornan Science Center programs. And you can see the Dornan Science Center in the background there, where kids go and engage in lots of different projects. And that was something that became very important to the science, particularly to the science program. And, Susan McCaskey and Martha Burke have been just fantastic stewards of this program. And they're the ones who really enact it on a day-to-day basis. And then about 10 years ago, Lois Johnson Mead and I formalized some of this in terms of trying to come up with a program that would involve every single grade level and every single discipline. And we actually have a scope and sequence for our place-based education program that talks about the areas of focus at each level. And it's more oriented towards the homerooms for the younger kids and then towards the disciplines when we get up to the older kids. And it also incorporates field trips and other kinds of projects that the kids are involved in. Now, Bob, you're very involved, not only probably the most important single person as far as maintaining this campus, but also involved with this. What kinds of things do you do with kids when they come out?
Well, all different grade levels have different programs that we do, especially during the Dornan Science Friday programs. each level has something that they do on a regular basis, and then we wander around the campus. We look at wetlands. We look at paleobotany. The campus has a great deal to offer in terms of plant communities and plants, everything from wetlands, woodland, pasture, ponds, display gardens, and even you've mentioned Polyrallis arboretum. The truth of the matter is that every square inch of this campus has something to offer. And you go back to my dad's sense of wonder in the world. If you have that, and if you're willing to ask questions, every inch of this campus has something to offer if you look carefully for it.
Yep.
You mentioned Susan and Martha, who are basically on the ground every day implementing and trying to improve the program. I don't think it's any coincidence that both of them went to Hill School. Both of them were involved in a place-based education program. And I think for them and for me as well, that experience lit that spark that sort of leads to a life of studying nature and trying to pass that along.
Can you think of what when you're out with kids, what kinds of things do kids say, or can you tell that they're experiencing that make you feel like it's really that this is worthwhile and that it's bringing something to kids?
Well, most of the time they'll surprise you. You're trying to lead them in one direction, and they'll find something else that fascinates them. A bug,
Right.
A funny-looking plant. Anything. There's so many things, and their senses are so attuned when they go outside. They're picking up everything. Not always what you intend for them to pick up,
Right.
but you got to go with it a little bit.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that my father was particularly good at, and Susan and Martha really too. I mean, to sort of adapt a little bit as you're walking with kids, and let their own interests sort of lead you to a certain degree.
Yeah. Well, that whole idea about using this magnificent campus as an educational resource, getting kids outside, and well, we think that does. We think it does great things for kids.
Absolutely.
And we're really committed to
Yeah.
it. So I think we're going to probably close down now, but we'd encourage people, if you're interested in this, come in and talk to us about it. We have a handout that we'd love to give you. You can share some more about the specific scope and sequence if you're interested, talk about other ways to implement it. But we hope that this has been a useful introduction, at least, to see what place-based education is about at Hill School and where the roots of it come from and how deep they go here. Thank you.